Welcome, Pewter Report readers, viewers, and listeners to a brand new edition of the Pewter Report podcast, energized by Celsius, the official energy drink of pewterreport.com. It is a Wednesday edition of the show. Want to say hello to all of the Pewter people that are just filing into the comments and the chat as we get our rocking and rolling. We got a fun episode today as we talk about the strengths and the weaknesses of the Bucs roster, the depth chart that they have right now as of May 8th. They've drafted their new draft class of 2024. Free agency, at least the big names are over with. There could be some additions down the road, but this is mainly a roster that will be representing your Tampa Bay Buccaneers for the 2024 season. So we're going to break it all down. I'm your host, Matt Matera. Joined with me is the face that runs the place at pewterreport.com. They call him SR. Scott Reynolds. Scott, how we doing?
Doing great, Matt. This is going to be kind of a fun show because sometimes the depth can be a little tricky, right? You might have a lot of bodies, but are they good? Are they experienced? Right. So it's going to be interesting as we kind of break down position by position how deep this Buccaneer team is and maybe where Jason Light and the Bucs personnel and scouting department may do a couple of additions, whether it is after the June 1 cuts, if there's any more of those coming.
Yeah.
You see players getting paired off these rosters every day on other NFL teams. I wouldn't be surprised if the Buccaneers shed a couple of players after the rookie minicamp. If they like a couple of these free agents that are tryout players, they might decide to swap out some players, whether it's somebody that's been on the roster or whether it's somebody that was signed after the draft as an undrafted free agent that just didn't quite make a great first impression.
Yeah, that's true. The rosters are always interchanging. I mean, we see it during the season. Teams trade for someone or a big name becomes available for whatever reason. Obviously, I've made this reference on the show before, but I think one of the biggest ones in recent years was Leonard Fournette becoming available when Tom Brady first came to the Bucs. He was literally signed with the Bucs like 2 weeks before training camp. So that was kind of a big name. I think, for example, this year, I know he's a bigger name than the caliber of player he is at this point of his career, but Odell Beckham just signed with the Dolphins a couple of days ago. I think he went into Miami today and signed the contract. So there are some players that fall through the cracks and do become available. And the June 1st thing is a big designation. I actually kind of said this. The Bucs aren't going to do this, but they could do it next year with Jamel Dean, where the June 1st designation, if they do it before, it's not a ton of dead cap money, but the dead cap money
of cutting Jamel,
cutting Jamel Dean, right. Yes, yeah. If they were to do it before June 1st of next year, all that dead cap money, and again, it's not too much, it would still be savings for the Bucs, would all go towards that year's salary cap. Where if you do it after June 1st, which you might see teams do this year when June 1st rolls around, some of it will go to this year's dead cap. Yeah. And some of it will go to next year's dead cap. So you will see some of that with players. To be honest, I mean, it's the nature of the business, but it kind of sucks, right? Because all the big free agency moves are already done at this point, and like teams don't have as much money once June 1st rolls around because you've already allocated to everyone else. So
sure.
That's
not to mention the draft classes that they have to sign too, which is between $8 to $10 million depending on the team and how many picks you have, et cetera. So yeah, it's I think the roster is still fluid as you mentioned, Matt, but probably about 85% set. I think you're going to see some movement, training camp, and then with the waiver wire moves during the preseason leading up to that first game. Remember, way back in Jason Light's early tenure with the Buccaneers, he nabbed Jaquez Smith, who was a pass rusher, an outside linebacker from, I want to say it was Buffalo. And Smith ended up becoming a starter that year. And then a few years later, in 2018, I believe, did the same thing, claimed Carl Nassib, outside linebacker, off of waivers from the Cleveland Browns, a former third-round pick. And Nassib was a 2-year starter in Tampa, was a team captain 1 year, and then came back for a kind of an encore season 2 years ago. So there have been some of those moves, and you mentioned Leonard Fournette signing right before the start of the season, in 2020. So I think there's going to be, one or two additions that still might really have an impact. Jason Light has never satisfied with his roster, always tirelessly looking. He and John Spytek and Mike Beal and Rob McCarty, those guys are always digging under rocks, trying to find additions to the roster.
Yeah, and we'll see what positions those are the ones that are addressed. It's typically, cornerback, I think, is the number one when you hear, oh, they got guys off the street. And like for this team, corner seems to be a position that tends to get injured a little bit more than others. But that's why you always got to keep, your ear to the ground, see what's going on. I think another one, again, just additions in the middle of the year. Not an all-time impact player, but a guy that had provided good depth for the Buccaneers. And this show is all about depth. A couple of years ago, and was on the Super Bowl winning team, Steve McClendon. When they traded
Antonio Brown.
Well, yeah, he certainly was important to the team winning the Super Bowl. Steve McClendon was one of those guys, not a household name. You're not jumping for joy, but he did provide depth for the Buccaneers. Yeah. And had an interception in a game as well. So brought joy of.
He was a huge addition, kind of a low-key addition, but you're right. Remember, Vita Vea only played in 5 games during the Super Bowl season.
Yep.
And had suffered that broken leg against the Bears. And that was kind of a deft trade by Jason Light to I think it was a 7th round pick, or they switched
it was a late round pick with the Jets. And
good pickup though.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll see what moves the Bucs do next. If there is one, we'll obviously talk about it on the show. But for the time being, we can only talk about the current guys that are in Tampa Bay. So we're going to go in order, offense to defense, because we'll save the best for last. We all know Scott's a defensive guy. So let's start with the quarterback position. Obviously, was a big topic throughout all of the offseason and just in the NFL, because it's quarterback. It's the most important position in football. But you got really a returning cast. Baker Mayfield signed the big contract. He's the starter. That's a big difference. And Thad Lewis kind of talked about this the other day when we spoke to the offensive coaches. Is another thing that's a little bit different this season is we know who the starting quarterback is. There is no quarterback competition. It's Baker Mayfield. S will be your QB2, and John Wolford returns as quarterback 3. And the fun thing about Wolford is, last year he was brought in because he's familiar with the Dave Canales offense.
Right.
He's even more familiar with the Liam Cohen offense.
On the Rams offense.
Right, exactly. So he's even more important this season than he was a year ago. And remember, halfway through the year, the Bucs had to sign Wolford to the 53-man roster because they had him on the practice squad. They had to sign him because other teams were interested in him. So John Wolford, maybe a little bit more important than your typical QB3 compared to the other teams around the league.
Yeah, and talking with the Bucs personnel people, they say that this is the best third-string quarterback that the franchise has ever had in terms of capability, and certainly within this offense. As you mentioned, Matt, he's even more well-versed in Liam Cohen's offense than he was Dave Canales.
Yeah.
Kyle Trask remains an unknown, and Tampa Bay is just like about every other NFL team right now. If your starting quarterback goes down, you're probably done.
Yeah.
Or you're certainly not going to be hitting the Super Bowl, right? I mean, look no further than the Bengals last year with Joe Burrow. Most teams don't have a backup capable of coming in and saving the day. Every once in a while that happens. It certainly happened with San Francisco, right, with Brock Purdy. Nobody expected that to happen. So we'll see. Kyle Trask is an unknown, but I think what is known is Baker Mayfield is the starting quarterback. He's not competing for the job this year. So I think from a depth standpoint, this is probably as good as it could be for the Buccaneers. Would you like to have a more experienced backup in place of Kyle Trask? Yeah, maybe. But at the same time, I think this team is comfortable with the depth, and I would say that the depth, because of Wolford and what he can do, and he might even be better than Trask if you need to get out of a game or two, to be perfectly candid, just because of his NFL experience and he knows the offense. I'm going to give this a slight strength. It's not a weakness. It's just a slight strength.
Right. Yeah. So like each position, we're either going to say a strength or a weakness. I think it's kind of one of those, like, there are different scales of how strong a team is and how weak is. I would not say this is the strongest of depth. If we're doing thumbs up or thumbs down, I would give it a thumbs up as well, really more for the Wolford thing and obviously having Baker under contract. I think really the Wolford thing tips the scales with a thumbs up. I'd probably even just go neutral in this case situation because it's a little bit different with quarterback than other positions because you're not going to rotate quarterbacks. At least you don't want to.
Exactly.
So I think Wolford kind of tips it that way. I think Trask, because there is so much unknown, yes, you do want a different veteran guy that's kind of been around the block. Like, how do you compare Kyle Trask to if they had Josh Johnson, who's been around the league, who's been with the Bucs before, and has been in like 15 different systems? I don't necessarily know because we've seen Kyle Trask play in the preseason and 2 snaps in the NFL, but mainly having Baker, having a system Baker knows, continuity, plus everything else we said, I think, it's got to be a smaller scale version, but a strength of the Bucs heading into this year.
Yeah, I agree. And so when you look at the running back situation, this was an area they really needed to get another running back in the draft, right? They really needed a guy that you felt comfortable leaning on if something were to happen to Rachaad White. And let's just set the table, folks. I mean, when you look at what happened last year for the Bucs offense, and this is like a little bit of good news and a little bit of bad news. Your Tampa Bay Buccaneers had on offense, since we're starting there, you're starting quarterback for all 17 games, you're starting running back for all 17, starting tight end, both starting wide receivers, Godwin and Mike Evans. Both of your starting right tackles, you're starting center, and you're starting right guard. That's rare. That rarely happens when you have that much continuity and health on offense, and you only score 21 points per game, and you won 9 games. It's like usually when you're that healthy, you win the Super Bowl, right? I mean, that's what happened in 2002. That's what happened.
The battle.
Yeah, in 2020, the Buccaneers were extremely healthy both of those years. But the Buccaneer team just wasn't as talented, and it was young in a lot of spots. It had to grow and kind of come into its own. So the running back position, it's Rachaad White. But I do like Bucky Irving. He has not even attended Bucs minicamp yet in terms of the rookie minicamp, but we're kind of making some projections, and I think that this can be a really good 1-2 punch for the team. And I love Chase Edmonds in the RB3 role. Sean Tucker, who knows? I don't want to say who cares, but I mean, if you're RB4, I mean, you hope that you never have to see RB4. So I'm going to give this just with my enthusiasm for Bucky Irving, and I think Rachaad White takes another step this year. I think this is a strength for the Buccaneers in terms of the depth.
This is a tough one. Yeah, this is a tough one to kind of decipher because we're going off of like the hopeful potential of what Bucky Irving will be, and we've said it before on the show. Drafting running backs hasn't always worked out for Jason Light. Now, this is going to be a great test, and we'll get to Redfish's super chat momentarily. Rachaad White is trying to be the one, no pun intended, to buck the trend of Jason Light not being able to draft running backs. But at the same time, he's competing for another guy that's trying to prove that Jason Light can draft running back. So put it this way. If Bucky Irving was not on this team, I guess if we're saying like before the draft, if it's just Rachaad White and Chase Edmonds and Sean Tucker, I'm saying it's a weakness because it's all Rachaad White or bust. Agreed. But with Bucky Irving, the hope and potential of Bucky Irving and what Rachaad White can do in year 3, especially with this offense, his new offense, I should say, and kind of the coaching tactics that we've already seen Liam Cohen talk about with what he wants out of Rachaad White. Much like the quarterbacks, I'm going to give it a small scale strength, but scarily enough has a lot of potential to be a weakness because of all the stock that we're putting into Bucky Irving. But kind of like what Redfish is talking about, the Bucs have better depth than what they had before. So thanks to Redfish for this $1.99 super chat, who says, if you like depth, try Celsius. Strawberry lemonade here. That's one of my favorite flavors. We'll get to Celsius in a little bit, but always appreciate the super chat, and
Celsius
we'll talk
has
about whatever.
Tons of depth, man.
Yes.
They've got so many flavors. It seems like every month they're rolling out new flavors. So Celsius certainly has more depth than the Buccaneers. That there's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
But so I think overall, Matt, what's your verdict on running backs?
Yeah, I'm going to give a small scale strength of the Bucs.
Sounds good. When you look at the tight end position for this team, there's a little bit of a caveat now because this is not going to be really a two tight end offense. When you look at last year, Dave Canales ran two tight end sets about 22% of the time. And the Rams offense in LA with Sean McVay ran a two tight end set or three tight end set 5% of the time. So they typically do not go with 12 personnel a whole bunch. It's mostly 11, which means one running back, one tight end, three receivers. And so as a result, you look at the depth and are you going to need tight end 3 and tight end 4 a lot? Probably not as much as you would have in Dave Canales' offense. But the one thing I'll say about Cade Otton is I think he got better as a receiver.
Yeah.
The postseason, I was down on Cade Otton last year. I really was. And I think part of that, what my eyes were opened with what Liam Cohen said. The dude played 98% of the snaps. Mm-hmm. And as Justin Peele kind of confirmed when I asked him about it, I said, okay, so Cade Otton, not the best blocker, but was that a function of him having to be on the field 98% of the snaps and fatigue, or is that just technique work and him being young? And at the end of the day, it was that he was overused a little too much. And what does that say, Matt? If he's playing 98% of the snaps, it means Dave Canales didn't think too much of rookie Payne Durham or backup O'Keefe. So I think that this team is better equipped at tight end with maybe Payne Durham in year 2, and I have no idea if Devin Culp is going to be big enough or effective enough in the NFL. But I think the Bucs tight end room is in better situation because they're only going to be playing one tight end at a time most of the time. And as long as Cade Otton stays healthy, I think the tight end room will be okay. But in terms of depth, I am not sold on O'Keefe at all. I don't think that he necessarily makes the team this year unless he is one of the absolute best special teams players. I think his hands are a liability. And I think that when you look at Payne Durham, big year for Payne Durham, as Jason Light said. We need him to step up. But right now, he's an unknown, unproven commodity. So I would say right now the depth is very questionable, and this is probably a weakness at tight end still. And we'll see what Justin Peele does, right? We'll see if Peele makes a difference.
Right. Yes.
Players.
It's tough to say that this room is a strength when we're talking about the best thing going for the tight ends is that they're going to be used less. Right. Like with Cade Otton not playing 98% of the snaps. And so that's why when I really looked at tight end with kind of the caveat of they won't be on the field as much. It's a 3-by-1, 3 wide receiver, 1 tight end. If that's the case, well, then sure, a lot of this is still going to be on Cade Otton. But what happens if Cade Otton gets injured? It's difficult to say about Payne Durham because Durham just didn't have too many opportunities. I actually think he's got a good chance, and he'll have to prove it in training camp. He could be one of the guys from last year's draft class to be one of the main players to really take the next step forward in development. We talked a lot about Cody Mauch, but it's a lot of if and hope and, if this and this happens. O'Keefe, I'm in full agreement with you. He had 1 catch last year. I get it was 4 touchdowns. It was nice. Yeah. But again, he is used primarily as a blocker, and the Bucs have the worst running attack in the league for 2 years in a row. So he provides nothing in the passing game. And on the flip side of that, with Culp, he's fast. That's exciting. Mm-hmm. I think he's going to get completely pushed over when lining up if he's asked to block. Now, I don't think he'll be asked to block a lot. And because of that, I think for the time being, I'm going to say it's a weakness. But if Culp can prove that he's a capable receiver and they just say, we're not even going to bother trying to ask you to block, but we'll use you in certain passing situations, I can get down with that. And in months from now, I can say, all right, the tight end room is a strength because you got Cade Otton and you got, Durham's took a step forward and Culp is a is a receiver that can do something, then I'd be happy to look back at the tight end room once again. But for now, you have to say it's a weakness. We can't say every single
Correct.
group is a strength.
Yeah, no doubt.
Tight ends probably
here's
weak.
the thing with Culp, and I want to like him, but maybe it was just a glut of weapons at Washington. But if this guy is that athletic and runs a 4.47, which is like faster than Roma Dunze, right? I mean, we're talking some pretty good speed here. We're talking wide receiver speed at tight end. Why was he essentially the fifth option on offense, right? Last year you had Roma Dunze, you had Jalen Polk, Jalen McMillan, Jack Westover, the other tight end. He had more catches, more targets, more yards, more touchdowns than Culp did. So Culp wasn't even the number one tight end at Washington. And this is basically just a traits projection. And that's what you do on day 3, Matt. You get guys to help on special teams, and then you throw the dart at the dartboard and you say, we're going to pick a guy with traits and hope that he was underused or underdeveloped, or, he's a hidden gem. And maybe that's the case there, but I have to see it to believe it with Culp. So I'm with you. I think it's a weakness at tight end in terms of depth right now.
I know we're talking about offense, but we do have a super chat, and you know the rules. You super chat us. We're happy to talk about it. Thanks to Tampa 2 for this $1.99 super chat. He says Jamal Adams as a linebacker / safety depth, Bowles draft pick going back to when he was the head coach of the New York Jets. Tricky one, because Jamal Adams coming out was fantastic for the Jets. I mean, he did everything for
Jason
that defense.
Loved him.
Yeah, and it was a really bad Jets team. Like, they crazily relied on Jamal Adams, and it was not the Jets defense that you see now. With that said, he's extremely injury prone, can't stay on the field, and a lot of his concussion, and you feel bad for that because it's obviously a very serious injury. But if he's not going to be able to play, then, well, you're not going to sign a guy that can't play.
Yeah.
He gets himself into trouble, not like with the law and stuff like that, but he's a little bit too outspoken for a guy that hasn't done much over in the last 3 to 4 years.
Right.
I think he could be a little bit of a locker room headache. And then he flaps his gums on social media a ton, again, for someone that hasn't done anything over the past 3 or 4 years. I get injuries had a lot to do with it.
Right.
But for a guy that talks a lot and really hasn't backed it up, I don't know if that's the ideal fit that the Bucs would like in this locker room. Remember, he's another flashy guy that came out of LSU.
Yep.
Bucs just got rid of a flashy guy from LSU. I get Todd Bowles will find creative ways to use him. If it costs the Bucs essentially nothing, I can see the comparison, but everything else with the personality, when he screamed at the trainer or the doctor because they took him out of the game because he just came back from the concussion and they took him out with a head injury, all roads travel to not signing this guy outside of that Todd Bowles knows him well.
I agree. And the character component's huge. The Buccaneers love their locker room. They love the chemistry of their team. They don't want to rock the boat. So I totally agree 1,000% with what you said, Matt. And I'll add one thing to it. He's now a coverage liability, right? He's basically a box player that can blitz, tackle the run, and can cover about 10 yards, right? He's lost a step with some injuries. And the Bucs, truthfully, they had this player, not the character, but the actual player a couple of years ago in Keanu Neal, right? And that experiment didn't work out. He got picked on in coverage. Todd Bowles kind of tried that body type, that blitzing, big body safety type. It just didn't work out. So I think as a last resort, if he's still around and they need somebody, I think maybe he's on the emergency speed dial. Yeah, but
I agree. It would have to take an injury early in the season or training camp, something like that to get him on call.
Yep.
Thank you to Rev Fish for this $1.99 super chat. You're always on call, Rev Fish.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Appreciate the comment. Says trivia. People forget Sapp played some tight end with 2 touchdowns. Yeah, he had a very famous touchdown. I think his first one came against Atlanta in Atlanta, which was also where Vita Vea had his first touchdown. I remember Sapp. Obviously, I saw this on TV. Caught the ball, scored the touchdown in the celebration, which he kind of jumped in a circle, holding the ball.
Like a pogo stick a little bit. Yeah.
Yes.
I think it was some Beyonce move at the time or whatever. But that was the hurricane package, as as John Gruden called it. He would say hurricane, like that was the goal line package that had Sapp in it. And Sapp was one of John Gruden's favorite players and still is to this day. So that's a great trip down memory lane there, Rev Fish. We appreciate that. Moving on with our depth, wide receiver, right? They just bolstered this room with the addition of Jalen McMillan, a player that you and I are both high on, Matt.
Yeah.
You wrote about him as your favorite pick in this year's draft. And the thing that I like about McMillan is I think he comes in with starter credentials, whereas Trey Palmer was a little bit of a work in progress. And I still like Trey Palmer's trajectory. I think it's still pointing up.
Yeah.
And Raheem Jarrett, this team is very high on Raheem Jarrett as well. So when you throw in, obviously, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Jalen McMillan, and Trey Palmer, and Raheem Jarrett, that's 5 players that this team really likes, that they really, really like. And maybe Devin Tompkins makes the team as a return guy if they keep 6, and they probably will keep 6 because when you factor in the 3 wide receiver offense, you're going to need more bodies at that position. They might only keep 3 tight ends this year as a result. You might have 3 tight ends and 6 receivers in the way the roster breaks down. So it's top heavy, Matt, right? It's very top heavy. And as long as Evans and Godwin stay on the field like they did last year, the depth was okay last year. I think it's better. I think Trey Palmer will be better this year. He'll get pushed by Jalen McMillan. So I think from 1 through 4, this team, it has really good depth. And I'm going to say that this is a strength, and I'm just betting that Jalen McMillan comes in as good as advertised. But again, you take away the number 1 wide receiver from any team.
Yeah.
Something happens to Mike Evans, right?
Sure.
All of a sudden, like all bets are off. But in terms of the depth players, wide receiver 3, 4, and 5, I'm okay with this depth right now. I don't know that they need another piece per se.
Yeah, I view it a little bit differently. So I agree with you. It is super, super top heavy. So everything I'm about to say does not apply to Mike Evans and Chris Godwin.
Right.
I'm well aware Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are 2 of the best receivers in the game, and they've been fantastic for the Bucs. I think they'll continue to be fantastic for the Bucs. I know I also said that Jalen McMillan was one of my favorite picks of this year's draft, and that still stands true.
Yep.
I love all of the potential that he can bring to this team.
Yep.
My concern is how quickly that potential comes to fruition for the Buccaneers. If it happens right away, if it's something that doesn't happen until later on in the season, which again, when you have Mike and Chris, is totally fine. You don't need him to be a producer right away. Where my concern lies is if something happens to Mike and Chris, and I agree with your point. You go around the league, you're not going to find a lot of great players. We're relying a ton on youth that has very little experience, and we're relying on the Bucs just saying, we like this guy. Yep. Trey Palmer has shown flashes, but he also showed doesn't always make the catch, had some fumbling issues. Granted, he was wide receiver 4. Everyone can say, oh, well, he had the big touchdown in the Eagles game. It was his only catch of the game. It wasn't like he lit it up. He just had a big moment right there. Raheem Jarrett. I get that the Bucs are high on Raheem Jarrett. I understand he had the hamstring injury or quad injury that kept him out for a lot of the season. Put him on IR.
He hadn't shown it.
Raheem Jarrett wasn't doing anything to that point up until the quad injury. So this is another one of those positions where my mind can completely be flipped at the beginning of the season if they prove it in training camp and during the regular season. Hopefully, we don't necessarily have to see it because Mike and Chris are doing their thing. But if we separate Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and we look at just hoping that the Bucs' young guys do work out, and they very much could work out. But as of right now, I have to say that it's a little bit of a weakness after Mike and Chris because I just don't feel that banking on all these young players to work out is the best strategy. Where in years past, they had some veteran guys that they did rely on in a couple of moments to try and get the job done when either Chris was hurt, Mike got suspended briefly, or whatever the case may be. They don't really have that, in case of emergency, veteran wide receiver this year.
Yeah, no, that's certainly a fair point. It does rest, I think, a lot of this on the shoulders of Brian McClendon, the new receivers
Yes.
coach, who comes
Oh,
with
yeah.
great credentials, but he is really going to have to work some year one magic with McMillan. He's going to have to get Palmer. You're really, Matt, I think to have this truly be a strength, I think Palmer and McMillan almost have to be interchangeables. They almost have to be
Yes. Oh,
wide
yeah.
receiver threes, to where
Right.
one's in the game or the other, it doesn't matter. They're both going to produce catches, first downs, touchdowns, etc. So, yeah, I'm with you on that. Offensive line, right? They've added 2 players to the mix at offensive line, and they've got all of the returners that matter back.
Yes.
In Tristan Wirfs, Luke Gedeke, and I think Justin School, right? He's I think School, and we didn't see much of him last year because of the health of Luke Gedeke and Tristan Wirfs, and that's a good thing. But I think School is better than some of the guys that they've had in years past, whether it was Josh Wells for a couple of years, or before that it was Joe Haig during the Super Bowl year. I just think that he's a little bit better of a swing tackle, that offensive tackle number 3 in your depth chart, and then also too, if there is a disaster, if all hell breaks loose, Graham Barton did play left tackle for 3 years. He's athletic enough to do it in a pinch. I know he's slated to, at center, but I mean, if there's a disaster plan, you've got to look and play your best players right at certain key positions. And left tackle, you're protecting the blind side of your quarterback, is certainly a key position. So the addition of Graham Barton, the addition of Elijah Klein, those are 2 good, fresh bodies that add to the depth here. And I think we talked a little bit about it yesterday on the show with Sua Opeta, Ben Bredesen coming in. These are better players in terms of their floor than Nick Leverett, than Aaron Stinney.
Yeah.
And so I think that we'll see exactly how improved this Bucs offensive line is. But I think the depth has improved with School coming back. Some of these additions, will the starting left guard spot be better? That I don't know, right? Will center be better if Graham Barton's in there and makes some rookie mistakes? You hope so, but you just don't know. Will Cody Mauch be better? I think so, but remains to be seen. But the depth, I think, is better this offseason, Matt. And I'm going to say that there's enough good bodies where I think the Buccaneers should be able to find 5 of them to have a better starting offensive line, and they'll have better reserves as well.
It's funny, right? Because we discuss all of these positions. And like for a wide receiver example, you love the starters. You love Mike and Chris, but maybe there's some questions about the depth. When it comes to offensive line, I feel like there's more questions about the starters and what they'll get from the starters on the interior than there is about the overall depth. So I'm in agreement with you. I think they got better from a depth perspective. I think Sua Opeta and Ben Bredesen are better than the combination of Matt Filer and Aaron Stinney from a season ago. So I think that's important. I think if Graham Barton can excel at center, you got a great backup center in Robert Hainsey compared to Hainsey being the starter. And what happens if Hainsey were to go down, because they would have to go to Nick Leverett or whatever the case may be. I also agree that they are better equipped if something happens at tackle, because School, is available. Brandon Walton's still on this team. He can kind of be moved around a little bit of everywhere, and he does have experience spot starting in situations where the offensive tackle has gotten hurt. So I think you bring in a great mixture of guys that have been here, guys that have been spot starters, like Brandon Walton had to go into New Orleans, a place that's never been easy to play for the Buccaneers, and I think they've gotten better really all across the board. Now, a lot of this is hoping Mauch turns out well, and Barton obviously is ahead as a first-round pick.
Exactly.
But, I think depth-wise, the Bucs are way more secure if something goes wrong than, over the past couple of seasons. And there's a lot of versatility with these backups, which obviously you want to put your best group out there. And then, of course, Elijah Klein playing into the mix as well. So, I'm all for the depth of this offensive line. It's really tough to build depth on the O-line, and I think the Bucs did it the best that they possibly could.
Yep. So Matt and I both agree that is a strength.
Yes.
Another strength every single day for me is the great taste of Celsius, the official energy drink of Pewter Report, Matt.
Yes, it is. It can help you get your day going and get you in a good mood because their flavors are just fantastic. You
Yes.
try something, maybe you're sipping on a new Celsius, you're like, wow, that flavor is good. And it instantly just puts you in a better mood. So, Celsius, there's tons of great flavors. We love the vibe flavors for sure. Whether it's that Galaxy vibe, Cosmic vibe, been having that a lot lately. Arctic's my personal favorite. So, a lot of fantastic flavors of Celsius. If you need to know where to find a Celsius, go to their website, click on their store locator, and punch in your address. It'll tell you the closest place where you can pick one up. It could be your local Walmart, 7-Eleven, or a local health and fitness store chain. But if you're lucky enough, depending on where you live, it could just be your bodega.
Bodega.
And after you know that you love Celsius and you're like, I want to get more. I don't just want 1 or 2 cans. You can buy it in bulk. Go over to Amazon. Get that variety pack because variety is the spice of life. And there's so many great flavors of Celsius. Click on the subscribe and save over at Amazon. And you can have it sent to your place of residence whenever you want. Could be a week, could be a month. Don't matter. You're in charge. You're the captain now. So just make sure you're drinking Celsius energy drinks, the official energy drink of the Pewter Report podcast.
Yeah, well, there's no show tomorrow, folks. If you've been paying attention this week, we've let you know we're not doing a show on Thursday because we're doing a show on Friday. That's right. The Bucs rookie minicamp day 1 coverage. Matt and I will be there.
Yep.
And we're going to be having all the insight at 4:00 live on Friday, a rare Friday show in the offseason. But you deserve it. Why? Because we're going to be watching some football on Friday.
Yeah.
Well, is it football? Well, they'll have helmets on, but helmets and cleats and gloves and shorts and jerseys. Yeah. Better than nothing, right? So
better than nothing.
We're going to give you a little analysis and breakdown of what we saw at Bucs minicamp day 1. And then on Monday's show, we'll have the breakdown of Saturday's practice as well. So, and now we were a little concerned, like, do we have to do a show on Thursday? Is there going to be a schedule announcement? Nope, not yet. The schedule will come out May 15th. I've got a story up on pewterreport.com about that. That's next Wednesday. So next Wednesday, we're going to be doing a primetime show where we're going to be breaking down the Bucs schedule and analyzing that. And KJ Britt, I posed the question, will the Buccaneers be opening the season in Kansas City? That could be a possibility.
I would love that. We
saw the Detroit Lions in the same boat as the Buccaneers are this year, right? That kind of up-and-comer team in the NFC. Yeah. Maybe it's a team that the NFL wants to push out there a little bit, right? And we saw what happened last year. That was a hell of a game. The Lions actually won 21-20 in Arrowhead on week 1. That's hard to do against the defending Super Bowl champions. That win really helped propel their season. And took the Lions, from the pretender to contender role pretty quickly. So maybe the Buccaneers get that little Lions nudge again with the league saying, hey, Baker Mayfield, that's a draw. This Buccaneer team, made the playoffs, got a playoff win. Let's push them into the national spotlight and see what happens. Plus, remember, you always have that storyline, Todd Bowles versus Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
They're 1-1 right now. And well, actually, I guess Mahomes is 2-1 because they won in the.
They did win in Tampa a couple seasons ago.
In that game as well. But when the Bucs won, it mattered the most, which was the Super Bowl.
Did, yes. So it almost counts as 2 wins because it's like, well, you won the Super Bowl. I hope that happens. I would love for the Bucs to open up the season. There is some tough competition with the home opponents that the Chiefs have this year. Yeah. The Texans, who obviously are a very marketable team. Yep. The Ravens would be a rematch of the AFC Championship game. Cincinnati, Joe Burrow's back.
Yep.
And then the Chargers getting Harbaugh. So there is tough competition, but I think the Bucs are right in that competition as well. It'd be super cool to see. It's been quite a while. Well, the Bucs did open the season, obviously, after they won the Super Bowl.
Right.
With Brady, and they defeated the Cowboys. That was a fun game. So, we'd like to see the Bucs do it again. Yeah. And I love seeing these super chats from Redfish. Thanks for the $4.99 super chat, who says, sorry to chat too much. First of all, do not be sorry. If you super chat us, you can say whatever you want. You can super chat as much as you want. We would never stop you from doing that. And don't let it stop you either. So thanks for the $4.99 super chat. No need to apologize. Between Evans, Godwin, Palmer, McMillan, Jarrett, and Tompkins, is our receiver room filled out already, set with 6 wide receivers?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. In years past, there's been a little bit of competition for
Right.
wide receiver 5 or wide receiver 6. Not as much this year.
I agree. Yeah. I agree wholeheartedly. I think that's the thing. Speaking of Todd Bowles and the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes, in that Super Bowl game, Mahomes was running for his life, and
Yes.
It was number 58 doing the chasing. Now it wasn't, it wasn't Marquise Watts. It was Shaq Barrett, but Shaq Barrett's no longer here, and Marquise
Correct.
Watts has his whole number 58 number for good luck. So let's start at outside linebacker on the defensive side, Matt. This is a very interesting, tricky call to make on whether the Bucs have enough depth here. Do they have enough depth in terms of sheer bodies? Hell yeah, they do.
Correct.
Right? Let's roll down the list here. Let's start with Yaya Diaby as the one starter, and then on the other side, it could be newcomer Randy Gregory. It could be holdover Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, who is trying to make a case to either be on this team or another team. He's in a contract year, as is Anthony Nelson. Chris Braswell, the second-round draft pick, who I'm pretty high on. I think that he might be the starter, if not in day one. There's a very good chance he ends up becoming the starter at some point, kind of like what happened with Yaya Diaby. But then, Matt, it doesn't end there. You've got a couple of other guys. Marquise Watts is another player in that mix. And then you've got Jose Ramirez, right? So the Buccaneers probably at best are going to keep 5 outside linebackers, maybe 6 depending on special teams. But when you rattle them off, you've got Diaby, Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, Braswell. I think Watts probably makes the team. There's 4. Randy Gregory is 5. And then, Anthony Nelson. The reason why I put Nelson a little bit last is I know that Todd Bowles really likes him. He's kind of a steady Eddie at that position.
Yeah,
he's a smart player.
With him.
But he's in a contract year. And if a Jose Ramirez flashes, right? If some of these younger guys, Watts, Ramirez, et cetera, if they flash, they're younger and they're cheaper than Anthony Nelson. And they can actually save around $4 million in cap room by cutting Anthony Nelson this year. I don't think they're going to do that. I think Todd Bowles likes him too much. He's too valuable as a reserve. He's kind of been there and done that. But there's only so many spots. And I do think that even though there's no Jason Pierre-Paul, there's no Shaq Barrett, there's no proven outside pass rusher, the starters might be in more question than the depth. So from a depth standpoint, I give this a thumbs up. I think this is definitely a strength because they have enough promising young bodies. 4 of these guys got to hit, right? They got to find one starter and at least 3 backups out of the cast of characters they have.
Exactly. I think outside linebacker, maybe not the best depth, but the deepest depth. And in a positive way, I mean that as well. Because to your point, somebody has to work out on outside linebacker outside of just Yaya Diaby, whether that's Gregory kind of having a renaissance year, working with his old coach, George Edwards, whether it's Watts getting more opportunities because his hit rate was fantastic when he would get to the quarterback. I think Braswell kind of puts it over the top too, because you're bringing in someone else with an influx of youth with great, measurements and tangibles and all of that stuff. And as much as outside linebacker was a problem for the Bucs, I'll put in parentheses problem because it wasn't, I don't think, a glaring issue. The Bucs were still top 10 in sacks last year.
Yeah.
And I get a lot of that was big help from Todd Bowles calling up blitzes, Antoine Winfield Jr. for sure.
Levante
David from the safety position, Levante David as well. But that's a long way of me saying that the Bucs can find ways to get to the quarterback position or quarterback, the thrower and everything like that. Yeah. They can find ways to get to the quarterback, even if it's not an outside linebacker dominating and getting double-digit sacks. Also, Yaya had 7.5. Like, if he takes another step forward, he's going to get those 10 sacks. And I think at outside linebacker, altogether, whether it's JTS stopping the run, Anthony Nelson being a steady Eddie, and everything we said about the younger guys, all around as a player, I think they got better at outside linebacker. And if Braswell becomes a huge hit, he was a second-round pick, then you already have a young core with Watts and Ramirez, but your young core just got even younger if you have Yaya and Braswell really, really doing their thing. So I give it 2 thumbs up in terms of the strength of this team.
Defensive tackle, I like what they have there, certainly with Vita Vea and Kalijah Kancey, right? Big year for Logan Hall. Really big year for Logan Hall, right? He has got to really step up. I do like the fact they brought back Greg Gaines. I think he gives them more juice, maybe not from a mouth perspective, but from a pass rush perspective than they had with Nacho, with Rakeem Nunez-Roches. I think I saw Greg Gaines flash more, in some of those key moments for the Buccaneers when he was subbing in for Vita Vea. And then you got Will Golston coming back. I think that's a huge addition. He's going to give you limited snaps, but I think there's still going to be quality snaps. Plus, he's a glue guy. The locker room effect, the high character is there. But it really all comes down to Logan Hall, right? I mean, this was his first sack against Aaron Rodgers. He had 2.5 as a rookie, only half a sack last year. He really has to step up. I had a phone conversation, did a phone interview with him a couple of days ago. He's up to 295 pounds now after playing last year about 285. Wow. He is bigger. He is stronger. He knows it's a big year. He's got no excuses for how he played last year. And I think that, as Casey Rogers said, the mental errors were down, but he needs to finish more. He did recover 2 fumbles, but he needs to be more of a pass rusher and make more of an impact. This team was this close to drafting Johnny Newton out of Illinois at pick number 26 had Graham Barton not been there. So they're looking for a reason to replace Logan Hall. It's up to Logan Hall to not give them that reason. He really has to step up. I think he's the whole key. I think that if he can be a solid guy to go in there, then you like what they have with him, with Will Golston, and with Greg Gaines. But if Hall shows up the same as he did last year, which is nearly invisible in most weeks, then this depth has some serious problems, because Vita Vea is going to miss a couple games, and probably Kalijah Kancey too.
And Gaines is only on a 1-year deal, and Golston's over a decade into the NFL.
Right.
I think this is a position, when we talked about adding a player later this summer or into training camp, I think defensive tackle will be the position that they try to add a guy. Hopefully someone becomes available, another Steve McClendon situation. I think that will be the case. And I'm not going to try to regurgitate everything you said, but it is all about Logan Hall. It's completely about what Will Golston said when he was on this Pewter Report podcast of, now he's got the weight down. You watch, year 3 could be the breakout year in Hall. And I hope it is for this defensive line, because it's already a good group with Vita Vea and what we saw from Kalijah Kancey as a rookie. But you got to worry about the injuries a little bit with those 2 guys. I don't know if Greg Gaines can be – he's great as a backup, but if he had to start double-digit games, I don't know if I love that. Will Golston, we love Will. They cut his snaps in half over the last 2 years. Like, he used to be a guy that was like 40, 50, 60%. The last 2 years, he's played like 25%.
He's 33 years old this year.
And he's 33 years old. Yeah. Again, I don't think Will can be a double-digit game starter. I think he's really just kind of in that role now of being a reserve guy. And that's fine, when you're in the league, as long as he is. That accomplishment in of itself. So
I think you're right, Matt. I think this is a position they're really going to keep an eye on. I think Mike Green he's a practice squad guy that made the team last year.
Right. Like Todd Bowles will bring him up, but I don't see much in him. Deidre Sanad is a guy that can stop the run, but I don't see a major impact.
They didn't resign him.
He's not even on. So I don't know. I'm going to say this is a weakness, but not as much as a weakness as, say, of the other positions that we've talked about.
Yeah. And if Logan Hall pans out.
And if he pans out, then it's a strength.
Yeah. It really hinges on him. Paul Bowen with the $1.99 super chat. Thanks so much. Can't wait to start planning trips around the schedule. Yeah,
me too. I want to know.
You both. we are prisoners of the NFL schedule. I mean, here at Pewter Report, don't cry for us. We get paid to watch football. Okay, it's not like we're digging ditches or putting out fires or anything. Okay, I mean, we know we have a pretty good job. At the same time, we are handcuffed into what we're going to do in the fall and the winter in terms of our personal time, right? When's the bye week? When can we go on a vacation?
Right.
When is the Monday night game? When can we have like a weekend getaway with our loved ones, right?
Yeah.
When is the Thursday night game? When is that weekend going to be free where we can, do that? What are some of the away games we're going to go to as Pewter reporters? So we'll find out next Wednesday. Make sure that you're here next Wednesday night at 8:00. We're going to have live schedule analysis on the Pewter Report podcast next Wednesday. So we're all going to find out together. I've got a daughter going to FAU. She's like, when are you coming down to watch the games? I'm like, I'll let you know next week,
right.
because we're going to find out when everybody else does next Wednesday.
I will say, the NFL makes everything a spectacle now. The draft is 3 days. They're making it big with the schedule, which I think is fun. I know you can bet on the NFL draft.
Yeah.
I don't think you can bet yet on like schedules of like when will the Bucs play the Chiefs, like over under week 5 or something like that.
Yeah.
But if you could, best place to go and bet on it would be over at mybookie.ag. Use that promo code Pewter and get some sign up with it and get a first deposit bonus when you sign up at mybookie.ag with the promo code Pewter. That's PEWTER. So that's free money in your account. If you learn from Plant City Math, you know that is a heck of a deal. They always got great bonuses, great parlays, different boosts on certain things. For example, player stats. I mean, the playoffs is going on right now in the NBA and hockey. My New York Knicks play tonight, trying to go up 2-0. So there's always things to bet on. You got baseball going on at the moment. UFC was just last week. They got more coming up. Conor McGregor's fighting, I believe, over the summer. That's one you're going to want to bet on. So check out all the different parlays, the boosts that they have at mybookie.ag. And also they have an online casino, which is great. I know not everybody can go up and get out and spend some time at the casino for a while. You can do it right from the comfort of your own home, which is awesome. You can play all the great games, blackjack, craps, roulette, all that great stuff. Over at mybookie.ag, just use the promo code Pewter, PEWTER, when you sign up.
Yep. Rolling right along, we're going to talk about linebackers. And, Matt, if we were to talk about this position this time last year, right, the depth behind Levante David and Devin White at the time, right, we would be talking about, KJ Britt, special teams guy, JJ Russell, practice squad guy. Well, Britt actually looks like he could be somewhat of a starter. And I'm curious to see how big of a jump he can make in terms of becoming a 3-down linebacker, if he's good enough in coverage, or as you wrote about on pewterreport.com, can he do that, or will they have to platoon with another inside linebacker this year, the way they did with Britt, playing mostly early rundowns and then using Devin White's blitzing ability and coverage ability on 3rd and long or obvious passing downs? But, we forget JJ Russell had a pick 6 in the preseason.
Yeah.
And then in his lone start, he had a sack on Bryce Young and I think 7 tackles. When KJ Britt went down, he had to move over from Mo Backer to Mike Backer. And then they put in Ryan Neal, the safety, at Mo Backer because they were just out of linebackers. Levante was out. Devin White was out. Servassier Dennis was out that week. They were down to J.J. Russell, and he really showed up. Yeah. So I feel better when you throw in Servassier Dennis, who, bit of a question mark this year because he didn't play well in the preseason game that he played in, and then he got hurt. He just needs to get in there and play. And I think the nerves got to him a little bit. Had a so-so game against the Colts, was so-so against the 49ers. Good player on special teams, but he's got to take that jump like we saw Zion McCollum go from being a special teams demon to becoming a factor on defense. And I think if that's the case, Kalen DeLoach is another guy that, I'm pretty high on. This team is high on. He's the undrafted free agent out of Florida State. The Buccaneers just might get by with the current depth that they have at linebacker. It seems like it's gotten better. I don't know if I would consider it a strength, but I like that it's trending upward, and we'll see by the end of the preseason if it truly is a team strength in terms of these backups and if they can factor into it.
Yeah, it's improved. So I think this is one of those where we got to say neutral more than anything else. It's improved, and a big deal of that is strictly just from the experience for everything that you pointed out about Russell and obviously KJ Britt getting to start down the stretch and in playoff games as well. And Safrasier Dennis could turn into that guy if they do have the platoon, maybe putting him, in coverage, because we had him on the show and he had that great explanation about, identifying what the Colts were doing on that short yardage play when they went play action, and everyone was fooled except for Safrasier Dennis. So, that could be something. And to your point about Kalen DeLoach, if he becomes this year's Christian Izien in terms of a undrafted free agent that makes the team and contributes in certain ways, that's a win for the linebacker room. So it's like you said, it's trending in the right direction.
Yeah, it is. And I'm excited to see Kalen DeLoach. This team did not draft an inside linebacker this year, so that helps his cause. He'll have to play well in special teams. Maybe he beats out J.J. Russell. Maybe they keep 5 inside linebackers because of special teams and because Levante David and K.J. Britt are both in a contract year, right? So maybe they want to keep some of these younger guys around for depth. Speaking of depth, the cornerback position, Matt, saw some comings and goings, right? Carlton Davis traded. That opened the door for Zion McCollum to step up, and it's a big year for Jamel Dean, as you wrote about on pewterreport.com yesterday. And so when it comes to depth, Bryce Hall was a big-time addition, and Kevin Ross thinks that he can be a starter. I think he will challenge either Jamel Dean or Zion McCollum for a potential starting role this year. So if they have 3 starters, that's a good thing, because history has shown that with Dean, they'll need him because he is oft injured. But I'm really curious to see my Kansas State guy, Josh Hayes, who was a special team stud. Matter of fact, led all NFL players in special teams tackles as a gunner for Tampa Bay. And they've moved him from the slot cornerback position to outside corner. They think he's best suited there. He actually played safety at Kansas State, but started his career at North Dakota State with teammate Cody Mauch, where he was an outside corner for a couple of years. So he's a good athlete, 4.4 speed. Enough size at 6 foot. He's got some long arms. We'll see. But I think between he and Keenan Isaac, I like the current depth. But the minute you start seeing some of the dominoes fall, we've had to see Todd Bowles get guys off the street at the cornerback position, as you mentioned at the start of the show. It's an attrition position, and
I like
we'll see. We'll see if. And to Zion McCollum's credit, started every game last year when he was asked to, didn't miss a single game. So maybe the Bucs have that going for him. Maybe between Jamel Dean, Bryce Hall, and Zion McCollum, maybe they won't need to get down to a Josh Hayes or a Keenan Isaac should Isaac make the team this year.
Right. A lot of this hinges on the overall health of Jamel Dean. Like, if Dean only misses 2 games this season, I think that's a win for the Buccaneers. Agreed. Now, with all of that said, I love the depth at corner for the Buccaneers, even if stuff does happen to Jamel Dean, because we saw it last year. Zion came in for Carlton or Jamel. I think the Bucs will do the same thing this year with just Bryce Hall coming in for Jamel Dean, and hopefully just Jamel Dean. He's viewed as a starter. He's been in this role with the Jets of playing behind 2 great corners in New York. So now he comes to Tampa and has more of an opportunity to play. And I think he'll get it, and he'll be able to show that he is a legit starter in the NFL. If Josh Hayes works out, I think that's a plus for the Bucs. And if he doesn't, I don't think it's necessarily going to make or break the entire secondary for Tampa Bay. We also have to remember Tavier Thomas coming over. Can play in the slot. If it comes down to it, they can throw him on the outside, even though he's better suited for playing at corner. But I feel like they have a lot more options in the quarterback room than maybe they even had a year ago. So I'm a huge fan of the depth at corner, and honestly, at this next position as well at safety.
Yeah, and really, you mentioned Tavier Thomas. So let's talk nickel corner, right? Because you've got Tavier Thomas, who was supposed to come in and challenge Christian Izien for the starting job. Then they draft Tyke Smith, who they think is probably going to take that nickel corner job right now and be the nickel back for this team. Competition will sort that out. The thing about Izien, and I know that Izien has his fans out there, and he started every game, all 19 games, including the postseason. But Todd Bowles wants and needs more takeaways from that position. That's a big reason why Antoine Winfield Jr. was moved from nickel in 2022 to free safety to put him in position to get more plays. And it wasn't just a natural position for Winfield being that slot corner. So having said that, when you look at Tyke Smith coming in, 4 interceptions last year, 2 forced fumbles at Georgia. Izien started off with a bang with 2 interceptions to start the season and then went 17 straight games without another pick. Only had a forced fumble down the stretch. So they want more big plays there. But from a depth standpoint, however it shakes out, when these 3 guys, Izien, Tyke Smith, Tavier Thomas, way better than what they had last year at depth. So I think this is definitely a thumbs up at nickel for sure. And as we transition to safety, Tyke Smith will be cross-trained at both, and so will Izien. So they do have a little bit of more depth at safety, because whoever's not going to be starting is going to be a backup at either position, whether it's Izien a free safety or Tyke Smith a strong safety.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost incomparable at safety, where you go from Antoine Winfield Jr. and Ryan Neal to Antoine Winfield Jr. and Jordan Whitehead. Oh, and Kayvon Merriweather with another year under his belt, because you're kind of comparing Merriweather last year to Merriweather this year. And I do like Izien, as if he has to be the backup free safety. You know, he's a guy that got to start last year, has gotten a lot of reps, granted at a different position. But I really like having Izien as a backup free safety as well. And then whatever they want to do with Tyke Smith, he's going to, like you said, they cross-train everybody. So you have Tyke Smith in there, who could be the primary backup or the starting corner. So there's just great depth. There's just tons of pieces really all over the place. So I love the depth at corner and safety, and I agree in the nickel as well for the Bucs. Really just the secondary I'm a huge fan of.
Yeah, and you know who I'm a huge fan of? I'm a huge fan of this guy, Eric Gross, in the Eric Gross Group. He is the official realtor Pewter Report for a good reason, because he will help you sell your home or help you buy a home. And he'll do it with class, and he'll do it with some speed too. He's got a good 40 time when it comes to getting transactions done. Eric is a Tampa native. He is a huge Pewter Report reader. He is father stationed at MacDill Air Force Base. He knows this area like the back of his hand, but he can also help you across the state as well. So if you're looking for a realtor, this is the guy to get on your team. Eric Gross and the Eric Gross Group. Go to housesinfla.com. That's housesinfla.com. Visit the website for the inventories and the open houses coming up. You can give Eric a call at 513-907-4271. That's 513-907-4271. Start the conversation with some Tampa Bay football. Get to know Eric, and then transition into real estate. And you're definitely going to want the Eric Gross Group on your team for all of your real estate needs. Again, the Eric Gross Group, the official realtor of Pewter Report. This was an action-packed show, man.
Yes, it was. And before we end the show, we got one more super chat.
Oh, let's do it.
Thanks to Paul Bowen for another super chat. This one of $1.99, who says Marshawn Lattimore is about to be available.
Yeah.
I mean, the more depth, the better, but we just talked about how good their depth is. Yeah. I don't know what he would cost.
Probably too much.
It would be weird. It would be like when Jason Taylor went from the Dolphins to the Jets. It's just I don't know. It just doesn't seem right.
Would there be training camp fights between he and Mike Evans?
Yeah.
Right? Battling.
That's also true. Yeah, there's a lot of history there. It's a little bit different than when like Ndamukong Suh and Evan Dietrich were on the same team.
Exactly.
It's a little bit different there if it's Mike Evans and Marshawn Lattimore.
Yeah.
Appreciate the super chat nonetheless, and something to really think about, I guess.
Yeah, I think his career's on the decline. Like a lot of the aging Saints players, Demario Davis still a good player. Only a matter of time before Father Time catches up with him. Cam Jordan, we're starting to see the downward slope with him. Tyrann Mathieu, I guess he just got re-signed, but his best days, I think, are behind him. The Saints just putting a lot of money, a lot of resources into old aging players, and having to let some of the other ones go. So, but we're not talking about the Saints depth. We talked about the Bucs depth today. And again, just a reminder, Friday, stick with us. Make sure that you tune in at 4:00 on Friday. We're going to have coverage at 4 from the Bucs rookie minicamp day 1. We'll wrap up the minicamp coverage from Saturday's practice on Monday's show. And then next Wednesday night at 8:00 live, 2024 Bucs schedule analysis from the Pewter Reporters. As the schedule comes out, we're going to break down all of the big games on Tampa Bay's slate. So there's a lot of great content too, Matt, on pewterreport.com.
Yes, there is. Please follow us on our social media on X, Facebook, and Instagram at Pewter Report. And then, of course, follow us, like, and subscribe over at Pewter Report TV, our YouTube channel. If you like the podcast, if you like our live streams, various videos and content that we put up, a lot of reaction stuff when the Bucs make moves. Obviously, Scott's got the Pewter Pulse, and we do things from the interviews and press conferences as well. Please like and subscribe. Leave a comment on this video too.
Please, yes.
Please do. And a lot of great stuff coming on Friday. So no show tomorrow, but we'll be back on Friday watching football.
And we're 55 subscribers away from 14,000.
Yeah, Derek Brooks.
If you have not subscribed to Pewter Report TV on YouTube, please do so. We're almost at 14,000. We want to hit that next week. So help join the Pewter people masses and help get us to 14,000. The Chris Godwin number, as Matt would say.
Yes, of course. Absolutely. All right. So until Friday's show, for Scott Reynolds, I'm Matt Matera saying thanks everybody for watching. And we'll see you on Friday after Bucs rookie minicamp for another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Out.